6:25.
Ready? Okay. We're going to call to order the meeting of the Green Bay Traffic, Bicycle, and Pedestrian Commission for Monday, September 17th, 2018. Item A, roll call. Looks like we've got a full...
Let's do a voice.
Voice, okay. Chairman Keepers? Here?
Brad Stroll.
Chuck Carroll.
Ray Smith.
Dan Tino.
Alder Craig Stephen.
Bridget Reardon.
Okay, we'll move on to B, approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Motion been made, second for the agenda. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. C, approval of minutes. Approval of the August 27th, 2018 Traffic, Bicycle, and Pedestrian Commission meeting minutes. I hear a
So moved.
motion been made, second.
Second.
Motion made, second. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. On to regular business, D, initial request under 1, consideration with possible action on request by Alderman Corpus Dax for a sidewalk study of the area bounded by Interstate 43, County Highway EA, Sitka Road, and Greenbrier Road.
Let me direct your attention to the screens as I bring up the map for location. So the request area, if you want to look at the map, so the western border would be I-43, southern border would be Greenbrier Road, Huron Road, which is County EA to the east, and on the north is Sitka. So this is quite a large area, and as with all sidewalk studies, recommendation would be to refer to staff so we can come back and provide you with our assessment of the area, and if we would have any recommendations, we present them at that time. If indeed those are approved or modified, then that motion would then go to improvement service for determination on whether they're going to assess for the installation.
Okay.
So unless there's questions, I'm recommending referring this to staff for study.
Any questions?
I do have a question.
Okay, yes, sir.
This is a newer area of Green Bay. Do we have any policy on requiring developers to put in sidewalks when a new subdivision goes in?
When new subdivisions go in, sidewalk is to be part of that. Correct. And you're correct that this is somewhat newer, but not necessarily certain if our sidewalk policy was in place when all of these homes were built, say, north of East Mason Street. That's where you're going to see majority. And really, East Mason Street divides this into the northern half is really residential, and then you have the I-43 Business Center Park that's south of there. Obviously, two different land uses. However, there's, from what we have seen anecdotally, that there's certainly pedestrian demand and activity that's occurring in both. We also have, as part of our zoning code and ordinance, that certain hierarchies of streets should have sidewalks as well, such as principal arterials and collector roadways. So those should have them as well, and as we know, there's a lot of them that predate the ordinance that don't have them.
Okay. Alder Corpus Dax is here. She wants to speak.
Yep, so this initially came up, Alder Corpus Dex, this initially came up from a resident who lives in and around the, I believe that's Ontario? Yeah, area where I think both on the east and west side of Ontario, there's partial sidewalks. We said, you know, what is going to happen here as far as what can we do to get these sidewalks installed for some of those streets, because they have a lot of issues, especially in that McAuliffe area with speeding down those streets, and you have kids who are on bikes who are walking, and just regular pedestrians running and walking on the street having to deal with the speeding drivers.
Mm-hmm.
That's where this is coming from.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions of the council members? Cheryl? No, okay.
Make a motion to refer to staff for study.
Okay, motion's been made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries.
What was the second on that?
Craig. Okay, regular business. One, initial request, consideration with possible action. I'm sorry, we're on item 2, pardon me. Item 2 is consideration with possible action on the request by Alderman Galvin to eliminate the no parking ordinance for the area surrounding St. Vincent and Mellon hospitals. Just a quick thing, if anybody wants to speak to this item, there's forms by the podium there, please fill that out, so when we get to that point, you can turn it in right over here. But if anybody wants to
I already have a
speak,
majority of them, but if there's any additional ones,
Yeah.
hand
That's
them in to me.
additional.
anybody who hasn't filled one out and wants to speak, if you please fill it out, so we have all the names that interested parties
So the
that
form
speak
is
to
right
it.
up there. Typically, what I do is just I take them in alphabetical order by last name.
We got that.
Okay. So,
All right,
do you
go
want me
ahead.
to start, or? So, okay, again, I'll direct your attention to the computer screens. So this area, well, there's been some explanation, of course, because this was a postponed item, so commissioners, you likely know a lot of the story behind this, but just to refresh everyone's memory, here's the hospital corridor, and you can see 2 Aldo Leopold School is in the vicinity and is also impacted by this request. So this is a general area, and I also do have a map, and this map was provided to Alder Galvin, and I know it was shared with the Neighborhood Association, the Astor Park Neighborhood Association, and I'm presuming the Alder had maybe shared with some other people too. So this has been around for a little bit. The only change that would be on this map versus what was distributed in the past is actually on the block on the east side of all of Leopold School. So you can see where the cursor is right here. The original mapping that went out showed the east side of the street as potentially being changed to 2-hour parking. So what you see here with the solid line simply means no parking, and it's actually a residential permit zone in that area right now. So actually that line is incorrect. It's partially correct, let me just say that. It's really a residential permit, no parking zone right now. So just in brief here, what you'll see, anything with the solid red currently means no parking is available. If you see a dotted red, that means no parking, but with residential permit or by permit only. And anything that you see in a dashed green line is what is currently permit zoned, that is proposed as being converted over to a 2-hour parking zone. So when I say 2-hour, that would be 7 to 7 Monday through Friday. So that is, so majority of the week, but weekends would be excluded from that. Also, too, you can see there's some blue lines, not too many of them, but that represents 4-hour parking, 7 to 7 Monday through Friday. And these 4-hour zones came about a number of years ago, and those on the commission maybe recall that once Alder Tony Tyson had brought some of these up, and these in essence were some of the fringe areas of the residential permit zone where some of the people that lived along those streets had requested that they have that converted. They didn't want the residential permit zones, so those ones in blue you can see in these 4 streets here, and then also this couple block segment of Grinion Street do contain 4-hour. So staff's position on this is pretty neutral, actually. I do want to make it clear that we are dealing with some roadways that are narrow in width. The majority of the roadways are 30-foot clear roadway width, which means it would be if we have high capacity or at nearing capacity parking situations on both sides, it wouldn't be possible to carry 2-way traffic. However, from our experience in other areas of the city, that where you have sparse parking and you have these narrower streets, in essence, because the volumes are so low, people can still navigate them and maintain two-way traffic safely. But that said, I'll refer back to an earlier statement that I made relative to Quincy Street, which would be right behind Aldo Leopold School. Initially, that was requested as being converted over to 2-hour on the east side. However, upon further examination, that segment, it was my recommendation, and as well as now Bill's from some discussion, is that because of the school traffic that happens, especially in the PM peak, that congestion would just be too much in that location to allow parking solid on both sides, because near schools, that's typically what happens, is that the parents will park in the no parking. Well, they don't park. They're there for loading activities, which is actually legal under our ordinance and state statute. So with that said, that's really the information that we have from the staff's perspective, is that it's really kind of up to the neighborhoods on what they really want to do with their streets. I presume we're going to hear cases both for and against the residential permit zones. I just keep an open mind on it, and just consider the things that I said relative to high capacity parking.
Okay. Alder, you could
Thank you.
start out there, please.
Sure. Bill Galvin, Alder, 4th District. When I was campaigning the first time, 4 years ago, 2.5, 3 years ago, I had a couple of people talk to me about the residential parking situation, and they were concerned because they felt it restricted them having people park on the street when they had guests and things like that, or they had children home from college, and getting permits because the kids' cars weren't listed to that address. They couldn't get the permits and things like that. It became an inconvenience for them. I didn't do anything about it at that time. Then when I was campaigning the second time, well, actually before then, I was contacted by 3 other residents that had issues with the residential parking permit. Wanted to know what it was all about and things like that. And then during the campaign, I had 2 more people approach me and ask me to look into removing it. I used to live on Quincy Street when this was a problem. At that time, there was parking allowed on both sides of every street. And as the hospitals expanded, you had staff and visitors literally parking every street in that area, literally driveway to driveway. And it was hazardous. You could barely get one vehicle down, much less an emergency vehicle. So the city listened to the residents. They instituted this policy, or this ordinance, and what it did was, first off, they restricted some streets. No matter whether you're a resident or not, there's no parking on this side of the street. That'll never change. And then the rest was residential only. As Dave talked about a little bit, over time, Alder Thyssen listened to neighbors that were complaining, and he would do little surgical cuts and remove certain streets, like 2 streets on either side of Astor Park were taken off the residential. Some of these other streets where you see blue and red between Irwin and Baird were removed. The 1100 block of Quincy, 1100 block of Jackson Street were removed. The 600 block of Quincy, which is really close to the bullseye, was removed because of the Ethan House that was there, and they could not issue permits to the employees there. And so they had to work out their issues there. So after all of this is said and done, I looked at it, and since this ordinance was instituted, St. Vincent's built a parking ramp, which some employees are allowed to use if they pay a fee, and then for visitors, it's free parking, 24 hours a day. St. Vincent's and Bellin bought several surface lots off-site, which they have a charter bus program that takes the employees to and from work, picks them up. Some still walk through the way. And so I asked myself, I mean, I've had a lot of people on both sides saying yay or nay, and the easy thing would be just put my head in the sand and walk away from it, but I thought, I do have people asking to have it removed. Do we still need the ordinance? And my thing has always been, do we have laws that we don't need? Is it needed anymore? Has the problem been solved? And in my opinion, I think the problem's been solved. They have free parking, and you show me an American that's gonna park a block and walk a block longer when there's free covered parking between them and the place they're trying to get to. It's not gonna happen, right? They have several lots for employees that are free, and if I've been told by parking utility, if employees park on that street and they chalk them and they move them 20 feet, they're still gonna get a ticket. Parking utility says you've gotta move the vehicle. You can't just move it 5, 10, 15, 20 feet and then avoid getting a ticket because you've moved it. You're gonna get a ticket. So I can't see an employee paying 20 or 25 bucks every 2 hours to park on the city street when they have free parking in other spots. I did, though, in my recommendation, say that everything north of Porlier Street should remain residential parking. I don't think there would be a problem, but I said, okay, let's do it, and we'll just do everything south of Porlier Street. We would change it to a 2-hour parking. I've had a lot of input from people. I don't have the exact numbers, but I have to say that those against it number at least 2 to 1 compared to those for it. And then I've got about 5 or 6 people that are ambivalent either way. They wanted an explanation of why I was doing this. I gave it to them. They're like, okay, whatever. They didn't care. So that's why I'm still going ahead with it. I don't think it's necessary. I know people are concerned. They're concerned about safety for children. They're concerned about their streets being overparked. But like I said, if you have a free covered parking lot, I don't see why you would park farther away just so you can walk, park on the street. I don't understand. And if the employees have free parking with a shuttle service, why would they take the risk of getting a ticket and parking on the street? To kind of complicate things further, I was told that there are residents, though, that are now renting out their driveways to employees. So to me, that's kind of taking a problem that we had and kind of recreating the problem so that they can make a profit. So now they park their cars in the street and they've got employees paying to park in the driveway. And that's certainly not what this ordinance is for either. This is to make the streets safe so we can get, residents can get up and down and emergency vehicles can get up and down. I mean, in a perfect world, we could all have residential only parking on our streets. I mean, I would love it on mine. Mine gets very crowded and it's like a slalom driving up and down. But it is what it is. And, these are city streets that are there for everyone to use. And so I think if there's not an issue, I think we should see if we can change the restricted parking. And I understand this is a 90-day period, so Parking Utility has promised me they'll be vigilant. And if they see any problems, they're going to let me know. And they'll be taking enforcement action. And at the end of 90 days, if it doesn't work, I will make my humble apologies and allow the signs to be put back up. But I think at the very least, we should at least give this a shot and see what happens. Thank you.
Have you scoped out the ramp? Is there enough part in your estimation, like in the ramp and the surface lots?
Yeah.
What you're saying is,
Especially on the
Some
weekends, they actually open up some of the surface lots to more visitor parking, right? The outpatient parking lots for St. Vincent's become visitor parking lots.
okay.
And the ramp, yes, I've never had a problem. When I used to live on the far west side, I never had a problem finding parking space at the ramp.
In the ramp, okay. So there's adequate parking in the
Yeah,
ramp?
absolutely.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Any
Thank you.
questions? Okay. Thank you, Alderman Doughty. With that, entertain a motion to suspend the rules and open it up for interested parties to speak then.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, what we're gonna do now is open it up, so anybody who wants to speak to this item, you can come up to the microphone at the podium, 2 to 3 minutes, kind of give us what your take on the situation is, if you would please, and Dave, you'll call them out?
Yes,
On the forms you got there?
I think the easiest procedure is going to just take them in alphabetical order by
Okay.
last name, and we have them sorted.
That's fine. All right, if you're ready to go,
So-
we're gonna call it the first one, and like I say, be concise and you keep your points to 2 to 3 minutes so everybody can speak and give their opinion in a fairly quick manner here, so.
Also, sorry, so we do.
If,
Do you want to come up?
Yeah, if you can speak right into the microphone, please, so we can record.
Supado, I live at 1019 South Quincy, directly across from Aldo Leopold School. So my understanding is the proposal is now that the residential permit parking will remain in the 1,000 block of South Quincy and not change to 2-hour parking?
Correct.
Okay, that was my main concern. My other question, though, is if there's no real necessity for parking by residential permit only south of Polier, then why do we need the 2-hour parking, which is gonna also limit the residents to that 2-hour and then have to vacate the
Right.
zone?
The residents, and this is a very little known fact throughout the city of Green Bay, resident nighttime parking is very restricted. But daytime parking, and I've had discussions with Dave and Parking Utility, you can call in and get a permit for a month or two at a time, if you want to. If you have something going at your home, or you have a son home from school, and he needs to park on the street, you can get those permits for a month or two at a time.
For the residential permit?
No, for residents can call in or go on the computer and just put in the necessary information and then.
For nighttime?
No,
the-
for daytime.
For daytime?
Daytime parking.
Oh, if it's restricted, you can get permission.
Right, if it says
Okay.
2-hour parking only, and you have something going on, you know, where you would need it every day, you can get permission to do that.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, if I could just say real quick, someone somehow got it in their bonnet that I'm in cahoots with the hospitals over this, and I just want to categorically state, I have not been in contact with the hospitals since my first election, and that was about the Webster Street reconstruction plan. The hospitals haven't approached me on this. I don't even know they know about this, so that's what I just want to settle that.
I spent several years working for the parking utility, and I got the calls. So a lot of times it was the resident themselves that, now the residents are limited to that 2 hours as well. If it's kind of a come and go thing,
Right.
I understand long-term you
Right.
can call, but if it's just kind of a quick, I've got a contractor and I'm going to be on the street, then you have to remember to call to get the
Right.
permission to avoid the citation.
Exactly.
Okay,
Okay,
thank you.
thank you.
Ron Dean? Yeah.
Sure.
And 1010 South Jackson Street?
Correct. Yep.
I should have read in Sue's, actually, Sue's into the record, which is 1019 South Quincy Street.
Okay. Hi, Ron Dean, 1010 South Jackson Street. I'm the current president of the Astor Neighborhood Association. I'm not speaking on behalf of them, nor on behalf of the neighborhood, just personally on myself. But I do want to make that clear. One of the issue I had is that the map technically is incorrect. It shows the hospital corridor going right up to Jackson Street, when technically it's pushed back to the middle of those people's backyard. So the hospital corridor is not, those people that live on Jackson Street are not in the hospital corridor. So that should be, they're right in there, correct. That part should be corrected. Number two, the neighborhood, all the people that are affected north of Porlier, we're not notified by the city of Green Bay that this change was occurring. Alderman Galvin, you did put a note in our newsletter. However, the person who publishes our newsletter is not on the board anymore. So we were surprised by when we saw that come out in the newsletter. On behalf of the Astor Neighborhood Association, we printed up the proposed changes along with the letter drafted by one of our board members and Mr. Galvin. And we got those out to all the houses, went around, put them around. So thus these people here actually got the flyers that we put on their door. So that's another thing. I don't know that everybody who is affected actually even knows about this yet. Last but not least, I checked 2 boxes. I said opposed, but I also said other. And my other is exactly like Sue said. I live on the 1000 block of South Jackson. The east side of my street would remain no parking. My side of the street would change from residential permit to 2-hour parking. Thus, all the people on our street were actually getting penalized. I personally don't mind if other people park on the street for 2 hours, but I don't see why it should change for us if we have a pattern of behavior that we've been following, over a period of time that hasn't hurt a thing. So I want to make that pretty clear. I do have neighbors that come across and they park on our side of the street during the day when they rotate their cars and do their things with their doctors and this and that. Sometimes they're out there more than 2 hours. And so it's just something to reconsider, that the people who actually live on that street shouldn't be penalized. So we should, in fact, be able to keep our permit, even if you do allow other people to park there for 2 hours. That's my take.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Next would be Lin Heslin, 1115 South Buren Street.
Yeah, I'm Lin Heslin, 1115 South Van Buren. Right now, with the residential permit, at least on Van Buren Street, it's not being enforced. So I think that, you know, we need to look at this. I think that, you know, we need to look at this. I think that, you know, we need to look at this. I think that, you know, we need to look at this. I think that, you know, we need to look at this. I think that, you know, we need to look at this. I think that, you know, we need to look at this. I think that, you know, we need to look at this. I think that, you know, we need to look at this. I think that, you know, we need to look at this. I think that, you know, we need to look at this. I think that, you know, we need to look at this. I think that, you know, we need to look at this. I think that, you know, we need to look at this. I think that, you know, we need to look at this. I think that, you know, we need to look at this. I think that, you know, we need to look at this. I think that, you know, we need to look at this. I think that, you know, we need to look at this. I think that, you know, we need to look at this. I think that, you know, we need to look at this. I think that, you know, we need to look at this. I think that, you know, we need to look at this. I think that, you know, we need to look at this. I think that, you know, we need to look at this the people on my street really view this as not a good deal because we never had to have a permit and it was never enforced. So either, if it's going to be enforced, then we probably have to look at some options. But this seems like, really restrictive as a resident. The other thing I worry about is, I know for myself and other people on the block, if you were to have any get-together, I host a ladies' nonprofit charitable lunch every once in a while. There's about 15 to 20 ladies, and it lasts 3 hours in the middle of the afternoon. I mean, what am I going to do about a situation like that? So, I don't know. I'm not saying I'm opposed to something, but I think this 2-hour restriction is really not a good deal.
Can I ask one question?
Yeah.
You said that you have people come over, but your street is residential. Where do they park when they come?
On the street, because right now, even though it's supposedly a residential permit, I've lived in that house for 23 years, and not once has anybody been on our street to check for permits.
Okay, so in essence, they park there because they know it's not enforced.
Right.
Okay, that's all. Okay, next is Gordon Johnson's, 1001 South Quincy Street.
Kind of looks like a block party here. My name is Gordon Johnson. I live at 1001 South Quincy Street, more specifically on the southeast corner of Quincy and Eliza, right across from Aldo Leopold School. You guys have taken half of my comments away by saying we'd stay with the parking by permit on Quincy, on the east side of Quincy Street. Another question or comments I would have is, and Dave, maybe you can help me out with this, is north of Eliza Street on Quincy, where we're showing 2-hour parking proposed now, is that a 30-foot wide street?
Yes.
Okay, if it's a 30-foot wide street, and help me out again here, I believe the legal limit for a vehicle width in the state of Wisconsin is 8 feet 6 inches wide. You have to be parked within 12 inches of the curb, correct? So that's like 9 feet 6 inches, and if you go on both sides of the street, that reduces the width of a lane down to 11 feet for traffic going both ways. That doesn't work. So I see no reason on Quincy Street, I think it's an impossibility, north of Eliza up to Porlier, to have 2-hour parking. I think it has to remain by permit, by residential permit. And another question I have is, if north of Porlier is going to be residential permit, why not continue to have south of Porlier along Quincy and Jackson and Van Buren? Why not have those streets remain residential permits only? The other thing is, if I am having a party at my house, a luncheon, whatever, I can phone in, right, to the city that I am having this on this day, regardless of the number of people there.
Correct.
Another question is, why would anybody rent out their driveways to hospital employees if they already have free parking?
Because they don't want to have to sit in the parking lot and wait for the bus to pick them up.
That's far away.
And then do the residents have permits?
That's against.
A business
what I've been told,
permit?
It's against the law for them to be doing that.
Okay. Anyway, I just don't see how it's feasible if we have 30-foot wide streets, have parking on both sides of the streets and 2 lanes of traffic.
I don't think we're looking for, on Quincy Street, to have parking on both sides of the street. I think
Sure. Right north of Aldo Leopold School, on Quincy, you've got 2-hour permit parking.
Do we
Talking
allow
about between
parking on both
Eliza and
sides of the street
Portland.
right now? Is that residential parking right now on
Both sides.
So.
It's but it's residential parking, but now when you have pickup and drop-off of Aldo Leopold, I guarantee that both sides of that street are gonna be parked in. You're gonna have kids crossing on the crosswalk across Eliza Street, seeing their mom or dad pick them up, and they're gonna dash across
So
the
we should
street.
make one side of the street no parking permanently. That would alleviate what you're suggesting is a potential problem. Making one side of that street no parking permanently would alleviate that problem, whether it's residential, 2-hour.
Then are you penalizing the residents?
Well,
And I would say, yes, why not just leave it as a residential permit? We've already got the infrastructure in place for the residential permits.
but if it's a problem with 2-hour parking, it's got to be a problem with the residential parking. If 2 residents are parked on either side of the block, you now have the same problem.
That so rarely happens. As a matter of fact, I think most residents are cognizant, if they park right across the street from each other, they're blocking things. So I think they do stagger themselves, just because they're aware that they don't need to block the whole street off. So I think that's gonna be a real hazard for kids going to Aldo if you have parking on both sides of the, 2-hour parking on both sides of the street. Residential parking, I think it's just fine and always has been. Summing it up, guys, I'm against any of the proposed changes. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Next is Jay Mortel, 1026 South Jackson Street.
I live in the 1000 block of South Jackson. Aldo Leopold's in the 1000 block of Quincy. So there's a lot of going around the block. A lot of people parked on Jackson in that block a couple times a day for about an hour each. My position is if it's not broke, why are you fixing it? For a few people that have complained, they're too lazy to call in and get a clearance for their card parties or whatever that is to get that set up. They're able to call the non-emergency line to get that. Residential parking by permit, we're being penalized as residents. If you have a parking permit, currently you can park on the street. Under this proposal, you're limited to 2 hours. Why are the residents, the people that live on the street, being penalized? That doesn't work. The width of the streets has been mentioned. Jackson, from a lot of times from the #1 fire station coming up Pollier, they come up Pollier to Jackson, turn south on Jackson to go to the Oddfellows home. Now, it's now called Rebecca home. I've lived in that neighborhood all my life. Anyway, if there's cars parked on the streets, it's damn tough to get a fire engine and a rescue squad down the street. So you've got a safety problem there. Couple that with a couple hours a day when all the parents are picking and dropping off kids, you got a compound problem there. You got a residential sticker, let them keep that, and enforcement. Who's gonna enforce this? You're gonna have your traffic people coming around every 2 hours to enforce this. How's that gonna tax those? They're gonna not be where they are now. So they're gonna have to come around every 2 hours to check off which cars are there and come back 2 hours later to check and see if they're still there. So those are my comments. I'm of opinion, if it's not broke, why fix it? I lived in that neighborhood when the parking restrictions went into effect. It was bumper to bumper car up and down from Greenio down to the hospitals on all those streets. What isn't being mentioned, what may be mentioned here, is you've also got people that are going to the Oddfellows home or Rebecca home. What's gonna happen? They're gonna not be using those parking lots. If you take a look at that would be the 1200 block of South Quincy. They're starting to park there to go into the Rebecca home. So, and they've opened up parking, I don't know if that's restricted, next to the grocery store. They have taken over, the Oddfellows or Rebecca home owns that whole parcel. They've taken over half that parking lot for their own parking, so.
All right, thank you, sir, for your comments.
Next, Kristen Phillip, 1145 South Van Buren Street.
Hi, 1145 South Van Buren. I am on the corner of Van Buren and Greenio. To put it in perspective, my kitchen window overlooks the grocery store. So I've been there for 20 years. I want to take in point right now that this commission is traffic, pedestrian, and bicycle. Is that correct what the name of this is?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm speaking for the other two, not just parking, because as a resident of Green Bay and being thrilled that kids can ride their big wheels down the street and kids in parking and walking to the grocery store, I see that every day, people walking. There's 3 curb cuts that I work with Rebecca Home on to get from my corner and opposite of me and into the Century Webster Avenue Market parking lot. There is a great amount of traffic that walks down my street, whether it be wagons, bicycles, strollers that use that area. I'm looking at the traffic that's in that area and that traffic that is going to disrupt the number of people that are walking that area. And I think everybody here in the neighborhood knows that everybody walks to the store. My first point is why the changes. Did someone from my block have these problems? And if not, let's look at making changes in those specific areas where someone had a problem, because like Mr. Gallen said, that they were adamant and they came and let's look at that particular area. Now he's probably gonna say it's my neighbor or something like that, but anyway. I am speaking for myself, and I'm also speaking for 3 other residents who I can't name because they're not here, but in my direct line of eye contact with, who couldn't be here tonight, who are also against this. I told them what I'd be saying, and then I'm here. I have here on my corner, the corners opposite, there are curb cuts allowing the residents of Oddfellows to cross easily with their walkers and wheelchairs, and allowing them to access into the market and Oddfellows parking. Webster Avenue Market sold half of their parking lot. There's some yellow stanchions, and that is for the Oddfellows. Rebecca Home, there's another name too, that is for their parking. If you drive by there any time of day, you see that it's not full. They choose to park on Jackson, is that? Yeah, Jackson, like I was saying. Why? It's smoking in front of my house. I'm concerned, and there has been a concern, and I have addressed it with my older person, I have addressed it with Rebecca Home, that at 2-hour parking, people on a shift, they park in front of my car, smoke, because they're not allowed to smoke anywhere near Rebecca Home. And I've been dealing with people who've been eating in front of my house, and especially from the nighttime, people who park from 10 to, well, whenever, like night shift, park in front of my house, they go work, they come out in the middle of the night, and they have their cigarette break, eat, leave their trash. And as I said before, this is something that I've been working with Rebecca Home on personally, because it gets to be a problem. So that is my problem with Rebecca Home. And I'm across the street from me, it's all commercial. It's not residential. So I'm seeing it for people who are south of Porlier. It's very residential and picturesque. I am looking at a parking lot. So I understood when I bought my house that would be the case. But I also hoped that my neighbors and whatever, I mean, even Webster Avenue Market people come and pick up the trash that blows across the parking lot. I think that the parked cars would pose a problem with accessibility to this area for all the residents who come and use that particular area. Let's see here, I'm going on my list. The proposed changes are that the 2-hour parking will be during the week, but not on the weekend. Employees will be parking there all the time on weekends. I strongly urge you to deny this request to make these changes. With the businesses that are across the street, there will be many employees that park in front of my house and others. It says, on my block, there are 8 kids under the age of 12. Now, every block has kids, and that's awesome. What the problem that we have is that the narrowness of the street and the cars that are parking and the amount of bikes and small kids. Now, I'm speaking for my block, which is the 1100 block of South Van Buren. Last point is Greenhill Street is very busy and fast. People go from Webster Avenue down Greenhill because there are no stop signs and go straight to Riverside Monroe. We have the problem with the fire engines who come through there more often than not, ambulances who come to the home. That is a problem because cars parked over on one side really bogs down that area. And also speeders. The speeding that goes down there, and the bicyclists who use that.
We're going to just keep it to the parking, not the speeders. I'm not trying to cut you short here, but the speeders don't have any effect on the parking. I mean, in the garbage, I understand that's a concern that you're working with. looking at the ordinance as it is and seeing about changing it, so. And we did say, 2 to 3 minutes and be concise, and
Okay,
I'll give you,
thanks.
thank you.
Go Tanya Sharp, 919 South Quincy Street.
Good evening, I'm Tanya Sharp, I live at 919 South Quincy Street, which is the block, I'm direction challenged, so I look I look across the street at, not directly across the street, but down one block from Aldo Leopold. I agree with my neighbors. What we have now works, period. It works. As far as having guests over, I learned something new tonight. I didn't know I could call in and say, hey, I'm having 15 people over, they're gonna be parking on my street. This is something I've talked about with my neighbors over and over again. I don't think our neighborhood knows that, so I think there might be other options that we can explore to alleviate some of the problems that Mr. Galvin has been trying to address or been approached with. Another one is, can we explore the option of maybe easing the permit process to get people their permits for their college-age students? What can we do there? But as he said, what we have now works. And if you change it to 2-hour parking, I feel like I'm losing access to my home. Because sometimes I do need to park out there for more than 2 hours. Also, I have concerns that, yes, the streets are narrow. Drop off and pick up at Aldo Leopold, those streets are tight. Very, very tight. Emergency vehicles going to and from are gonna have problems. Me getting into my house is a problem. I have a brand new neighbor. The first thing she said is, gosh, pulling out of my house just to go to work the other day, it was so tight I didn't think I could get out of my driveway. So if you allow parking on there for 2 hours, solid parking, we're gonna have problems. It's gonna be difficult. Also, what do I have to say? Bill, I will say, I raised the question about the hospital. And my mind went first to the hospital because less than 10 years ago, the hospital did ask our neighborhood if they could build a parking structure there. It was denied. So they went out to these remote lots. It's now costing them money, costing them these charter buses. If they have access to close down the ramps, make it only for employee, and make visitors go out into our parking lot for or out into our neighborhood for 2 hours, my neighborhood becomes a parking lot. I don't want that.
Who do you think's gonna park there? I mean, we're
Visitors
hearing that, I'm just playing both sides of the fence here.
Yeah.
We're hearing
Please
there's
do.
plenty of parking for the employees, so I'm just curious, who do you think's gonna be parking there?
If they shut those parking structures down to employees only, it pushes all the visitors out into my neighborhood.
But I'm hearing from Alden Gelman that there's plenty of parking space in the ramp.
I know,
and,
I'm just saying.
I'm not
that's where
picking on you, I'm just
No,
trying to
I'm just
understand.
saying, I raised that question,
Uh-huh.
given the history that they've already asked for this. If you lift this restriction, people don't park in our neighborhood right now because even I thought it was over restrictive than what I realized. I didn't know I could have guests at my house just by calling in.
Mhm.
It is an understanding in Green Bay, this is a restricted parking area. And so I think that's what makes it work right now. And if we start lifting that, and I don't think 90-day period is gonna be long enough. It's gonna take now more than 90 days for this to get out to the public and the public to realize, oh, I can park there now. I think after 90 days, the parking would go up and it would just creep up year after year. It's my opinion. Like I said, I live at 919 South Quincy Street, right there with Aldo. And I don't mind sharing the streets with them in the morning for drop off and pick up. But you don't need to be that every single day. She's right about the cyclists. We are a family of cyclists. If I now have cars parked on either side and I'm trying to ride my bike down the street with my children, because we can't ride on the sidewalks. Anything over 20 inches in diameter is illegal to be on the sidewalks. We're supposed to be in the street, which we are.
Actually, by ordinance, you can ride on the sidewalk. You're supposed to dismount when you meet a pedestrian. That's the
Okay.
only restriction on the sidewalk. Sorry, I got,
The last time, when we were
that
going.
was what I did.
Bill's
That must have
correct.
changed because.
Bill's correct. Yeah,
Is it?
you're allowed
Okay, that
to
must
ride
have
bikes
changed
on
because-
sidewalk. Not that I encourage it, but.
Yeah,
it is-
no, last time I heard, because when we were getting our Webster sidewalks for Webster School, we were told you can't have bicycles over 20 inches in diameter. So,
Someone told you
okay.
incorrect
All right.
information.
So, but we ride in the streets, and we will then be forced to ride on the sidewalks, but as she said, we do have a very heavily populated walking neighborhood. There are people on strollers and people walking to walking to the trail, walking to the grocery store. It just, what we have now works.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
Our last speaker, I'm presuming unless we had other people come in, is Cheryl Simpson, 1015 South Quincy Street.
1015, I'm between Gordon and Sue, South Quincy, right across from Aldo Leopold, and I'm grateful that they decided not to do the 2-hour parking because my husband, I mean, he watches them. They started parking and stay in the car, so that's not parking. What did you call it? I don't remember.
It's basically stopping.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
that block is filled up after 1 o'clock in the afternoon till the time after 3 o'clock. My work is flexible. I do work for the hospital, but I work in home health, so trying to get out sometimes if I time it badly is just about, it's nearly impossible to get out. I have to wait until all the parents get through. So I try and time it because it is that bad and it's that, and then it's like they were saying too, the blocks around Aldo Leopold where they're parking right now, it's like you're zigzagging trying to get in and out because of all the parents. And that's just, it's hard, going down on Quincy and the 900 block, all the blocks around Aldo and around, it just gets loaded up with traffic in the afternoon. So it's just, it works now fairly well, but my biggest concern is just the around the Aldo blocks is somehow to make it, I don't think the 2-hour parking is going to work for that. That's all I have to say.
Okay, thank you. Is there anybody else that we missed to speak yet? If not, go back to regular business. Do I hear a motion to go back to regular business?
Second.
Motion made and seconded. All in favor? Okay, we're back to regular business. Do you have anything else you want to add, Alderman, after the comments session here? Or?
I mean, basically, I think they're very concerned about their neighborhood and about having the status quo disrupted with this restriction being lifted. But I mean, this is some of the problems they point out are problems that are not related to hospital employee or visitor parking. It's related to other issues that could be addressed by thinking this in a different way. And then again, all of us would love to have restricted parking. I mean, who wouldn't? I've got neighbors parking in front of my house. The garbage truck can't get to the garbage can. I mean, this is all over the city of Green Bay, not just in the Astor neighborhood. It's the near west side and it's the near east side for quite a distance on both directions. And if the problem is visitor and hospital employee parking, I think that problem has been solved with the parking ramp and the outlying surface lots. And if people are asking for it to be removed and it's not needed, then I think it needs to be removed.
Okay, thank you. Anybody got any thoughts?
Just one thing to interject. I think along similar lines of what I had described with really my one and only comment on this whole discussion is any roads that have at or nearing parking capacity, I think should be considered off the table. So I'm not sure if that means, I mean, it's obvious that the street right behind the school, that's obviously the busiest, and we had that confirmation as well. I'm just curious if there are other streets. I know that we had heard from a couple of people relative to Quincy Street between Eliza and Porlier, that is somewhat heavily used during the school peaks. Now, if that was changed, would we get more activity in those areas? And if that becomes at or near parking capacity, we could have similar issues to the one block that we're going to keep it residential. So I'm not sure if at this time, like a parking capacity survey, I think if indeed the request is partially or fully recommended and approved, that potentially maybe something of that nature may be investigated prior to final decision.
That seems to be most of the comments were bordering the Aldo Leopold School down in that area, right? Most of the people who were concerned about the area, and you got a lot of green in other areas there that, I don't know, like we heard any Any comments from anybody?
And the reason I say that is that, and I know that there was some discussion relative to loading, talking about loading and stopping and standing. These residential permit zones are, I mean, technically we call them no parking residential permit only or by permit only, meaning that in a no parking zone you can still stop and stand, meaning you can temporarily sit in your vehicle there. Let's just say you're waiting for your child to walk to your car. That is a legal thing to do. You can sit in a residential permit zone just in your car waiting for a kid. There's nothing really that a parking utility can do because it's not illegal. Loading is completely legal in a no parking zone. I think what they've done by the school, especially on the east side of Quincy, is that they've worked with the parents and maybe someone can clarify if they've used cones, but I think they pretty much weeded out that problem, is to not have them park over there or load. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think the schools work pretty closely with the parents to keep the east side of the 1,000 block of South Quincy free from parent parking. Although I did notice in the 900 block, there's sporadic parking on both sides.
It's not pretty sporadic, it's pretty solid.
Pretty
On
solid.
900 block, it's solid on both
Right.
sides of the street.
So that brings up a good question. So how do you get rid of the loading activity? The only thing you can really do is implement a no stopping or standing and have it enforced. That's the most restrictive. People cannot occupy their vehicle waiting for people that, is that really where we want to go with this? I don't know. If it's a current problem, then maybe it needs to be addressed. I don't know. I'm just bringing forward my concerns relative to if we have or near parking on both sides on 30-foot streets, that does become a traffic and safety issue.
Are all the streets in this map view 30 feet or some wider than 30 feet?
Glad you asked, Chuck. I actually did a survey in our database of that, and looking at this, I see everything is 30 feet. I'm talking north, south streets, east, west streets within this whole area of consideration. I mean, there's a couple that are like 28. I mean, you might as well call it, it's very close to that, but even slightly narrow, it's just like one block here. The only street that is wider is Portlier. And Portlier is a collector street, as we know. There's a signal at Monroe, signal at Webster, and it is used as a collector route. So that one's actually 10 feet wider. But all of the other streets are classified as residential and are 30 feet. And this is both east and west of Webster Avenue.
Because with that narrow width, are we, instead of parking 2 hour on one side or 4 hour, whatever your color scheme was, 2 hour, I guess, so don't end up something like over by Jackson on the west side of town, that street between Oneida and Ridge, that was so narrow that we flip-flop, no parking on one side to parking on the other. I forget the name of the street. What was it? Langley. Yeah, just because of the access issue, if you got parking on both sides and emergency access and garbage access and snow plowing in the wintertime, not that I'm looking for snow today. Killing mosquitoes.
Right. But yeah, other than that one concern of mine, I've always kind of looked at these streets as, what's going to be the happiest medium for the majority of the residents.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah, go
As
ahead.
an alder, can I just speak?
Sure.
Alder Bargar. So I just want to make sure that, and maybe you do know this, although Leopold is a choice school, there's no busing. Parents have no other option but to drive their children to school. They can't, and it's not a neighborhood school. It is a choice school, so you have to apply to get into that school. So the people that live in the neighborhood to walk, they can't necessarily go to that school unless they've been accepted. So that's why Aldo becomes a particular problem, and just like Da Vinci. They're both choice schools, there's no busing, and so parents have to drive, and then they have to be able to get their children.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Do we want to?
I haven't-
Yeah, we did close, sorry.
I haven't heard much of concern other than around the school. I'm wondering if we should refer this back to staff and come up with some recommendations concerning the school area. And then maybe we can look at changing the parking in some of these other areas that don't appear to have a problem if we change the parking regulation.
It seemed to make sense to me. That's
I
kind
think
of,
this is just too big of an area.
it's almost like Alderman Tyson kind of piecemealed certain areas together where neighborhoods wanted it, and I hear what they're saying, you know, in their.
I think what Tyson had done is he just really took that eastern fringe area of the zone, and that's where he relaxed. If you look at this, it's just those blocks, the far east blocks here, and then there is actually a 2-block segment of Grinion that was changed over. This is 5+ years ago. But I guess if this is something that you would like to refer to staff, I guess we would probably want to get a little bit more direction than just school area. Is there something in particular? I mean, street borders always work great, unless you're really looking for a recommendation of that too, but.
I guess I would look at it, possibly to refer it to staff with Alderman Galvin. I mean, you know the constituents in your neighborhood.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, majority's against this. You know, it's pretty obvious.
The ones that are here.
Right.
You don't know what the rest, I mean,
I don't
people
know
come,
if
they
that's
get to.
something. I know definitely the ones on the other side, east of Webster Street, would prefer not to have the residential parking from Porlier Street north. That area right there. The ones south of Porlier, east of Webster, I've only had one person respond, and that person was adamantly for getting rid of it. But that, you know, one person speaking from the south. The rest probably don't see it as an issue.
Right, that's what I'm thinking.
Maybe they just don't know it's an issue come before the board.
Yes.
If it wasn't for the
Well, I've let people
Astor
know.
Neighborhood Association, I don't think any of us would know it.
That was my question.
We need to keep we have some rules that we need to follow for a meeting. I'm not
I
trying to,
understand.
I understand your concern, and, you know, there's certain procedures and rules we have to follow.
Yep, I
so
understand.
Go ahead.
I just want to caution you that if you put something on the agenda that you're looking at changing something around the school, there will be many more people in this room than are here right now. Because in the school, it will impact the whole city. That doesn't have to do anything with the neighborhood. It has to do with all the parents from all over the city that come in. And as a grandma, I come and get my 5-year-old grandson from Aldo, and I have to park somewhere so I can go and get him across the street. So it will become an awfully big issue. Think about that a little bit more maybe before you, because it doesn't really seem like the school was the issue at all, did it? Just think about
Certain
that.
area, I mean, it seems like it's,
Well, just think
That
about
school's
that.
been an issue when it was a private girls'
Yeah,
school.
well-
I mean, because you had girls driving there and they had to park someplace, and, I mean, it's, any school, and Dave can tell you, we were just over at Nicolet's school. Every school in the city of Green Bay has parking issues at pickup and drop-off time. It's kind of like living next to the airport. You know, there's gonna be planes going overhead making noise. I mean,
that's part of when you buy your house, you realize where you're at, for the most part, so. I want to move this along here, so. Any other comments from the rest of the council, chair, people?
The only thing I
No,
ask is
okay,
that if there is a motion to refer back to staff or study, just to make it a little clearer what you're looking for as feedback from us.
Okay. Right.
'Cause I'm a little unclear, actually. I mean, I'm hearing that there's concern around the school. What do you want us to do? Do you want, I know I had made mention about a parking capacity study.
And it might be a totally different issue than what we're talking about here, probably, right? I mean,
Yeah, it sounded like there was, the issue was between Eliza and Porlier and Quincy and that, but that, I think, should be addressed, like Bridget said, just separately. With all the narrow streets and with it working, I would see no reason to change it. And the residential permit.
Keep it the way it is then, is that what you're saying? Anybody else got any thoughts that way, or?
Let me ask this. If you change the regulation here, who has the advantage? Who would love to have this change?
Bill, maybe you're the best answer.
A handful of residents. Basically, that's.
Are they, Alder, are they concentrated in a certain area?
No, actually, there's some that don't mind it changing or would like to see it change to live in the area that's gonna remain restricted. And then there's a few that live south, and then a few that live east of Webster Street. So it's kind of, break it into three parts. You got north and south of Porlier, and you got east of Webster. So there's a few east of Webster, there's a few south of Porlier, and a few north of Webster that said they'd like to see a change.
But I think if you're gonna change it, you have to have no parking on one side and then whatever on the other side, just because of the narrow width, like over by Langley between Oneida and Ridge type of thing, because of all the issues. I mean, it's a similar setup, and Dave can correct me if I'm wrong, if I'm not visualizing it right. It's narrow, and you got parking on both sides you can't get through, and then in wintertime, you got the snowbanks, which restricts it even more, that if you're gonna change it, you can't have parking on both sides.
I guess my counter argument that would be, if it's residential parking and they're having that party with 15 people, or they're having, all the neighbors have their cars parked on the street, you have the same problem. Whether it's residential parking or 2-hour parking, the street's too narrow for parking on both sides at the same time. And I don't see how you can say it's okay for one, but not for the other. I mean, it either is or it isn't, you know. And to say it hasn't been a problem, well, we don't know, you know. We could check with parking utilities, see, I mean, I did check with them to see about enforcement. They've been issuing on average about 180 tickets a year in that residential parking area for the last 3 years on average. They get complaints, but they also have set schedules where they're supposed to go through and tag cars that don't have the permit, or if they're in a time zone if they've been there too long. So that's all I can offer up on it.
So to Chuck's point a little bit, and I may have lost this, so why do these residents want it changed again?
What they were saying was they have a party, they forget to call in, 12 of them got tickets. Okay? And the city says, I don't care if you didn't call in, you're paying the tickets. The other one was kids come home from college, they have a narrow driveway, they have a lot of cars, and the city said, hey, those cars aren't listed to that address, we can't issue a permit unless you can't park on the street. And some people think it's just silly to have restricted parking when they don't see a need for it anymore. And that's my main thing, is I don't see a need for it.
There's nobody that supports it.
What's that?
There's nobody here that
Nobody,
supports it.
One of two ways: either receive and place on file, or we're gonna have city staff work with Alderman Gelman and figure out something in that neighborhood. I don't know. But I guess.
I just think that you have a multitude of issues here. It's not that straightforward and simple. I'm not really comfortable in voting on anything right now without further staff study, because it would seem to me maybe we're talking about too big of an area, and maybe there could be some changes in some of the restrictions in some areas and not in others. But I don't have that information right now, so I feel very comfortable about voting on it.
It's hard to vote for this without any audience, I mean, besides aldermen who are speaking for it. I mean, I don't know if we've gotten any, that'd be tough.
Well, we got two constituents, right? Is that what you would say, Alderman Gelman? Two constituents that have.
Probably 7 that talked to me about it.
7 that talked to
and
you,
then when it went public, probably another 4 or 5 that said they were in favor of it.
Okay.
Now, obviously, if you're looking at numbers, if it was voting, keep it the same would win. You know, hands down.
In that whole big area. But what I'm saying is, what about some areas that people in fact do want the change?
Well, the ones that want it, that have expressed it, I said, they're kind of like buckshot, spread all over the place. You know, there's not one focused area. It's 2 or 3 here, 2 or 3 there, 2 or 3 over here. So again, if you were to do, say, just between Porlier South and west of Webster, you're looking at 2 or 3 people that are in favor of it. If you go east of Webster, 2 or 3 are in favor of it. You go north of Porlier, 2 or 3 are in favor of it.
Okay, let me ask you, Alder, is this whole area in your district?
Yes.
I'm wondering if we hold this off in a month and get some more discussion, if we could have either you or the city staff do some surveys of the residents in that area.
Yeah, I'm almost thinking if we're really making a neighborhood decision, I mean, is there a way to get their feedback and get a better, you know?
Is this
better
entirely
data?
in your neighborhood association?
Almost all.
When's your next meeting?
It was tonight, we postponed it till next week. So-
But maybe what I'm.
Well, we had the whole executive board was out of
Okay.
town this week, so, yeah.
I would like to see more citizen input, because I think what we're gonna find is that some areas of your neighborhood are perfectly okay with the way it is, and other areas are perfectly okay with changing. But I don't think we know that right now.
But it's, they put out a mass email where I got some responses back, and then they put out a newsletter where I received more responses.
Okay.
So, I mean, if people know about it, I mean, they should know about it if they're receiving the emails and the newsletters.
Mr. Chairman?
We're gonna do something really special. Give me a second. We're gonna suspend the rules one time.
I got
Hold on just a second. Hold on. Let's give them a chance.
Move to suspend the rules.
Motion made to
Second.
suspend the rules. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, second, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Give you one more chance, and
Thank you.
whatever you gotta say it now.
Okay, I'll probably, that's, my name's Gordon Johnson. I did not receive an email. The only way I knew about this was Astor Park group coming around with flyers saying about, telling us about this. And I also agree that it is too big an area. It sounds like, to me, what I'm hearing from Bill is that if you're east of Webster, they're happy with changing it, but it seems like the area around Aldo up to Webster would rather not see any changes. So I agree that it's, should probably be divided into several smaller parcels, with east of Webster being one parcel, and then perhaps north of Polier being one, and south of Polier being one. And then as parcels. And then I think you can get some legitimate input. And I don't think right now that parking is a problem, so why change it? You know?
For who?
Well, when I park overnight, I have to call in, or guess what? Boom, I got a $25 parking ticket, which I've paid.
Well, you got the other side.
That's
of the
on
equation.
me.
The other side of the equation, people don't wanna call in. That's what I hear as part of it.
Pardon?
Other people don't wanna call in to get that, like you. I mean, you're a good conscientious
I don't want to
citizen.
pay taxes either, but by golly, I got them.
But okay, thank you. Anybody else real quickly?
Just one last.
Sure.
So again, I want to make it real clear, as the Astor Neighborhood Association, we're the ones that ran around and put the flyers out, just so people knew. Alderman Galvin worked with us on the one side on what we stated. We didn't take sides, we just put out the facts, and we put out the map, so everybody knew what was going on. The last thing is that these parents that are standing right now on Jackson Street, on the 1000 block of Jackson, they're in their car, they're waiting for their kids to come around the block. Oftentimes, they block our driveway. They're not aware of the 3-foot rule from either side of the driveway. And I often have to have them move so I can get in and out of the driveway. It's another thing that I didn't think about when I was addressing you guys, but if they were to park there for 2 hours and block my driveway, I might not be getting to work. So, just one thing.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Yeah.
Real quickly, because we're,
I would like for you guys to, if you don't vote this down tonight, look at other options of just educating our neighborhood, because I do think that there's an education problem. Like I said, neither of us knew that we could call in to have visitors or to have a party at our house. I think there's a lack of education of what the rules really are in our neighborhood.
thank you.
It'd be a good thing for the neighborhood association.
There you go. All right, let's go back to regular
I'm a neighborhood
business.
president.
I'll make a motion to go back.
Okay, no more comments, thank you. We're back to regular. Motion been made. Second, all in favor? Back to regular business, okay.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to throw this out. People
Okay.
can vote the way they want. I would move that we refer this back to staff for further study and with the instruction to come back with a plan that would allow us to You getting this all down, Dave?
If not, we have it.
Yeah, okay. A plan for, how should I say this? For us to consider different parking regulations in different areas of this proposal, because I think the area is too big for us to address right now.
Okay, that's your motion?
That would, mind if I add one thing to it, Dan?
Sure.
And that, including the width thing, that, you know, how would you address the width?
Yes. Very important.
Okay.
Dan made the motion.
Dan made the motion, do I hear a second?
Second.
Okay, motion made and seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, motion carries. We're on. Item 3, consideration with possible action on the request by Lin Galvin to allow 15-minute parking for school drop-off on the south side of Portland Street from Monroe Avenue to Jackson Street. This would let parents park and walk their children to and from Aldo Leopold School and alleviate some of the congestion at the school.
A lot of this item, I think, was contingent on
Right.
the result of item 2 was, so I don't
Yeah.
know if there's really any information to make a motion on this.
Okay.
The two go hand in hand, so if you're referring the one to staff, I would say
Mr.
postpone this one would be the logical.
Chairman, I'd move that we refer item 3 to staff.
Motion made and second, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. 4, 90-day trial expiration, remove the no parking zone on the west side of Aphrodite Road from Wildflower Road to Sun Terrace.
This zone, as you remember, this is an area that they really didn't even know why it was restricted. They found out that it was just to open up the street for people to walk in, but we really didn't have any issues with that. And so it was removed, and I have not heard a single complaint about it being removed, so I'm presuming things are working well, and I make the recommendation to move it forward to ordinance.
Okay, motion been made, or no?
I'll make the motion.
Need a motion.
I'll second.
Motion been made and second, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Informational next meeting, Monday, October 15th. We kind of were talking before the meeting here, Dave, probably the 15th.
Can't do it on a Packer night.
So, I think of the
It is a
next
bad night.
night, I think we were pretty good, except Craig has got a meeting on the 22nd for the following Monday. I don't know, could we get a pinch hitter for an alder to, or would we necessarily need to have an alder? I can't remember.
No, it's not required, we just need to meet quorum.
Okay,
Is that a home game?
yes.
Yes.
That's the Buffalo.
Yeah, that's why we're moving it to the 22nd.
Oh, we are gonna,
Yeah,
okay.
that's what we're looking at doing.
I'm
Does
sorry.
that work good for you, Brad?
22nd works for me, yes.
Okay.
I'm a
Yeah.
maybe on that day. I'm a maybe on that day. I may have a
You're maybe?
class.
All right.
but I might drop.
Well, we can get somebody to fill in for
Yeah.
Craig, pretty, Barb has been.
Might get beat.
Barb is
Barb.
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 If you need
We
for
got
a quorum, go ahead
We
and,
need 4.
We got
Yeah,
yeah.
Chuck
You
is
don't have
good,
to
Ray is
now.
good,
I'm good.
Dan is good, and Brad is good, so that's 4, right?
Yeah,
So we're good for the 22nd.
okay. So I guess
Is it
then,
22nd
I'm
or?
gonna put
that's
it in my
informational then,
calendar
so
just
it would
in
be
case.
Monday, October 22nd rather than the 15th.
Okay.
And Barb, if you're bored that night,
Well, yeah, fine.
We
I'm
gotta
gonna
make
put
sure
it in
there's a
just in
room
case,
available,
okay?
What's that?
protection and policies that night too.
Yes, very good point. We may
Oh,
not
that's
have
right.
this room.
okay.
So because this is informational and there is no action, I will investigate room availability for Monday the 22nd.
Okay.
And then I'll respond via email and make that confirmation.
Okay. Sounds like a plan. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn then.
Make a motion.
Motion was made and second, all in favor?
As long as we're adjourned, Mr. Chairman, I write a monthly column for a newspaper up in northern Wisconsin. And my last monthly column had to do with, it's a tongue-in-cheek article about controlling a traffic violation. So I wanted to share that with you and take it home, and good bedtime reading.
Laugh at it, is that what
Yeah,
you're
it's
saying?
funny. I think it's
Did
funny.
you give me a copy too?
I will give you a copy.
Because I need some tongue in cheek.